Sometimes, as night creeps across the desert, the wind changes its voice. It's no longer the dry breath that blows through Red Hollow, but a thin, icy whisper that seems to know my name. I recognize this sound from afar. I've heard it many times. It always comes from the same direction, the hill where the old gallows stands. It was there that I hanged more men than I dare count. Some deserved it, others not so much. But what haunts me aren't the faces I saw, diets, what remained afterward. Because on that damned hill, even decades later, the ropes never stop swinging. Not when the wind sleeps, not when the entire city falls silent. They continue as if someone were still hanging from them. That night, I was sitting on the porch of my office, wiping the stardust from my chest, when the whisper returned, low, drawn out, almost human. I closed my eyes, and I swear by the bones buried in this desert, I heard someone calling me. My name came out scratched by the wind, as if coming from a throat already dead. Gallows Hill is half a league from the city. No one climbs it after sunset, not even the men who pretend to fear nothing. They know what I know, that death has not left that place. The wood of the structure creaks as if breathing, and the ground holds the weight of every man who has ever been hanged there. I tried to ignore it, but anyone who's lived so long surrounded by ghosts knows. Ignoring a call like that only makes it return stronger. I grabbed my hat, climbed into the saddle, and let the moon guide me to the top of the hill. The wind grew thicker with each step, as if the desert were pushing me toward a place I didn't want to return to. When I saw the gallows, I felt that old shiver creep up the back of my neck. The ropes were moving by themselves, slowly, as if they were waiting for me. That night, I realized the gallows wasn't empty. It was calling me in the next chapter. I climbed the steps to the gallows and discover that the executioner never left. I remember well the first time I heard his name, Silas Crowe, the hangman of Red Hollow, a man who never raised his voice, never argued, and never missed a knot. Back then, I still believed justice was served with rope and wood. But Silas believed in something darker. He only appeared on nights when someone was about to die. She wore black from head to toe, her hands covered in leather gloves so worn they looked like part of his skin. Her eyes were sunken, dark, as if she'd once looked into hell and decided to stay there for a while. I never saw Silas drink, laugh, or pray. It was as if the only thing alive inside him was the certainty that the gallows needed to stay fed. They said that before each execution, he would speak softly to the rope. Yes, to the rope. He would slowly run his fingers along the noose as if caressing a sleeping beast. Then he would look at the condemned man and say, in a calm, almost gentle tone, "Don't worry, she always finds the right neck." But what truly separated Silas from the other executioners was what came next. When the body swayed and the last breath was lost in the wind, any normal man would cut the rope and order it to be buried. But Silas never cut it. He left the bodies hanging until sunrise. He said it was the rope's time to decide if it was satisfied. I never quite understood what he meant by that until I started hearing the ropes sway on windless nights. Some people swore they saw shadows moving on their own atop the gallows. Others heard laughter trapped in the air. I didn't believe these stories until I started hearing them too. The executions Silas conducted carried a different weight. The entire town seemed to hold its breath as he ascended the steps. The dogs hid, the horses reared, and when the wood creaked, everyone knew another soul was being delivered to the gallows end, to that damned rope that seemed to have a will of its own. There was a man, years ago, who tried to cut the rope before dawn, just one. They found him the next day, hanging from the same noose, his eyes wide open and his tongue swollen. After that, no one tried again. When Silas died, I thought the curse would die with him, but I was wrong. The ropes kept swinging on their own. And the scariest thing, no one ever climbed up there to hang anyone again. And yet the gallows never remained empty. Over time, men from the town began to disappear. People who swore they'd never set foot on that hill, all found the same way, hanging from the old gallows, their feet inches from the ground, swaying in the rhythm of the wind, or whatever was there. Today, when I close my eyes and remember Silas, I still see his gaze piercing, meek-old, soulless, as if he knew that one day the rope would call to me, too. Silas could have died, but not by hanging, and what he left behind is still alive. I never believed in ghost stories told at bar tables until I started hearing the voices beneath that wood. The first time was one cold dawn, when I decided to climb the hill alone. The sky was still, windless, and the desert slept in such a heavy silence that even my horse's hooves seemed a sin. As I approached the gallows, I felt something different in the air. It wasn't just cold, it was as if the ground was breathing beneath my feet. The wood of the gallows creaked softly, as if someone were walking above, even though no one was there. I knew that sound. I could distinguish old wood from lively footsteps, and that night they were footsteps. I climbed the steps slowly, my hand steady on my holster. The pale moon barely illuminated the hanging ropes, and yet I saw them swinging on their own. Each sway seemed synchronized with an invisible breath. That's when I heard it. It wasn't wind. It wasn't animals, human voices, low, scratched, whispering names that shouldn't be spoken. I crouched down and pressed my ear to the floor of the gallows. The sound came from there, from underground, as if something were buried beneath the wood. Mixed voices, men's and women's, all speaking at once, repeating familiar names from the town. Some of those names were still alive. My body froze. No matter how many executions I'd seen, this was different. Those voices didn't cry, didn't plead. They called, as if asking for company, as if they were waiting for someone to swing by their side. I slowly stood and looked around. Nothing but desert and sky. But the voices continued, low, persistent. A collective whisper that seemed to rise through the wood and into my bones. That night, I realized the gallows held more than bodies. It held the voices of those who never left, and those voices were still calling. It was on a moonless dawn that the first disappearance occurred. The city was still asleep when there was a knock on my office door. The face of the young man who came to get me was pale, as if he'd seen hell itself open its gates. He didn't need to say much. I already knew where to go. The body hung from the gallows. His boots still swung slightly, even though there was no wind. The man was Samuel Hargrove, a farmer known for drinking more than he should have. But he wasn't the kind of man to climb a hill alone at night. The strangest thing, there were no signs of a struggle, no footprints other than his own, as if he had walked there of his own volition. The rope was old and rotten, but the knot was perfect, exactly the way Silas used to tie it. The same loop around the noose, the same tightness around the neck. There was just one problem. Silas had been dead for 30 years. As I observed the body, I felt a chill that wasn't from the cold. The night before, as I passed the gallows, I clearly heard a name whispered in the darkness: Samuel. At the time, I thought it was just my tired head. But now, seeing that man hanging, I realized it was no coincidence. The gallows had called him, he answered. I examined the ground. No sign of any rope brought from town. No wagon. No tracks of another horse. Just Samuel and the damned rope that had never been cut. The news spread quickly. The town was silent for days. No one spoke out loud, but everyone knew the executioner had returned. Not in flesh and blood, but somehow his presence was still there, tied to those boards and those perfect knots. As the body was removed, the remaining ropes swung slowly on their own. And that was when I understood Samuel wasn't the last. The gallows had begun calling names again, and no one was safe. I'd always believed curses were inventions of old campfires, stories to scare children and drunken men. But that week, as the town tried to forget Samuel's body, I began to piece together a past that was never truly buried. I found what I needed in the old courthouse archive. Yellowed, brittle pages, smelling of mold and rust. At the end of the report on the death of Silas Crowe, there was something scrawled by hand. Shaky words, written by someone who must have heard it with their own ears. As long as there are sinners, the rope will call new names. Silas said this shortly before he died. He didn't beg, he didn't cry, he smiled, as if he knew death wasn't the end of his work. The town never took him seriously. They thought he was the words of a madman. But now, the bodies began to sway again. I read and reread that sentence until my palms were sweating. I began to notice the pattern. With each man found dead, the rope swung harder, as if each hanging body was an invitation to another. It wasn't just old wood creaking. It was an invisible creature breathing through the nooses. That night, I returned to the gallows. The wind had stopped, but the ropes hadn't. They turned slowly, at an almost human pace. I approached and heard the whispers again. Voices overlapping, scratchy, repeating names. One by one, And then I heard the last one. My name, Elias. For a second, all the air left my lungs. The gallows wasn't just killing men at random. It had chosen its next victim. And this time, it was me that I knew that night would come. From the first whisper, from the first rope swinging by itself, deep down, I always knew that the gallows didn't just call sinners. It called those who knew it firsthand, those who served it. And no one served the gallows more than I. I returned to the hill while the city slept. The moon was covered by thick clouds, and the wind was completely gone. Still, I heard the creaking steps before. I even set foot on the first one, as if someone invisible was already climbing it, step by step, just waiting for me to join him. With each step, the wood vibrated, as if recognizing the weight of my boots. The ropes swayed in a slow, hypnotic motion. Pay, and then they beg in turn not to fly, like snakes seeking the next neck. The old structure groaned, as if waking from a deep sleep. When I reached the top, I felt the air chill around me. It was like being surrounded by something you couldn't see, but felt every beat of your heart. That's when the first rope moved on its own, forming a perfect loop the same knot Silas had made. Then a second, then all of them. A silent chorus of nooses ready to receive. Before I could draw my gun, I felt the rough touch of the rope against my throat. No one behind me, no hands, just the grip, firm, resolute. I didn't need to struggle. I knew it. The gallows make no mistakes. I looked up at the gray sky, the taste of night running down my throat, and whispered to anyone listening, no one needs to push when the gallows calls your name. And then there was silence, that heavy, thick silence that only exists when death has finished its work. The ropes swung slowly in the darkness, as they always did, and at the top of the hill, the gallows has gained another hanged man. And so, on that windless night, the gallows of Red Hollow chose his last name. Or perhaps just one more, because if there's one thing I've learned from this cursed land, it's that certain stories never end. Just wait for the next one to hear the call. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you do if you heard your name whispered in the dark? Leave your comment below. I want to hear your thoughts on this curse. If this story gave you chills, short video. Subscribe to the channel Land Active, the bell so you don't miss the next dark tales from the Old West. And now, click on the video that's appearing on your screen and discover the next mystery that Sheriff Elias Blackthorn has to